Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast, where you get to learn everything you want to know about addiction and recovery. I'm your host, Angela-Pugh, co-founder of Kansas City Recovery, life coach, and recovering alcoholic. To learn more about me, you can listen to episode 0 on your podcast app or find us on the web at addictionunlimited.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Angela-Pugh. Thank you for spending some time with me today listening to the pod. I hope you guys are having a great day out there. As usual, I have an awesome episode coming up for you guys. I told you a little bit about this last week. My good girlfriend, Carrie, is with us today, and she is going to talk to us about some personality stuff. I am not going to go too much into it myself because I will never explain it correctly. So I'm going to let Carrie do it. Let's take a minute and welcome Carrie to the show. Carrie, thank you so much for being here and doing this with me.
Thanks for having me, Angela. I'm very excited to be here today.
So tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I am a recovering alcoholic, and through my journey and my recovery, I discovered a book called The People Code by Dr. Taylor Hartman. It was suggested to me. And People Code is all about finding out why you do what you do. And through that process, I discovered why I do what I do and why the people around me did what they did. And I became passionate about understanding what motive is and helping other people understand what drives them and connecting people. And it's pretty much what I have then developed a business into and turned into my life's work.
So the People Code is really fantastic. Of course, I've done the assessment myself a couple of times, and it's colors, right? So there's red, blue, white, yellow, and each of the colors has a core motive. I'm a red. My core motive is power, right? And knowing that about myself it just allows me to know myself better and why I behave in life the way I do, and also allows me to figure out how to help myself better, right? Instead of going against my core trait, right? Which is power, my motive.
Right.
So that's why I wanted to really introduce this process. I think most of us as addicted people, we tend to be really, really smart. And most of us also spend quite a bit of time, especially when we're thinking about getting sober. Yeah. We spend a lot of time trying to fix ourselves and self-help books and now podcasts and YouTube videos. And we're always digging, trying to figure ourselves out so we can fix ourselves. And so I think this stuff is fascinating to more people than just me.
Yes.
So I really wanted to get into those different colors, the core motives, so people can start to understand who they are and how it affects our sobriety or our journey, right? Like, how can we better help ourselves in recovery by knowing what our core motive is? Does that make sense?
Complete sense. And let me start a little bit with your listeners may be familiar with the different personality assessments out there. And I know we've talked about it, Myers-Briggs and DISC, and those are all behavior-based assessments. So this is very different. This was like the last self-help book I read at Borders. I would go there and camp out when I was trying to, quit drinking.
Oh my gosh, that was my favorite bookstore on the planet.
Oh yeah, the big chairs.
I loved Borders.
I would consume the self-help books one by one. And then I got to this one. It was actually recommended by a friend of mine. And early in recovery, I'll tell you a little bit about how that kind of went down. It was my first year in recovery. So I'd been sober a year, and everywhere I turned, I was having relationship problems. My partner, my spouse at the time, I was newly married. So we've been married a year, and he was saying a lot of the same things that my former husband was saying, my first husband. I felt like he was whining, and I didn't understand. I thought that the things he was saying or complaining or lecturing me about were the things that I thought my first husband had the problem with. So here I am now. I don't want to be divorced again, right? And I'm hearing familiar things maybe somebody should take a look at. So my girlfriend had suggested this book. She goes, there's a personality assessment with it, and I think you're a white personality, and I think he's a blue personality, and I think he wants, because she's a blue personality, he wants intimacy and connection, and you want peace. And once you understand this, she's like, just read it and you'll get it. So I got the book, I read it, I got it. I was depressed for about 2 or 3 days. And then pulled myself back together. And I realized that these limitations, each of these these personality styles has a set of strengths and limitations. And each one of them, I thought they were bad habits. I thought that it was if I just prayed hard enough, or if I, did some program, or, how long it takes to change a habit. If once I got rid of those habits, those causes and conditions of why we drink, because I really didn't understand at the core why I drank. I drank to be comfortable. I knew that because I was uncomfortable. And then alcohol was my tool to become comfortable. But I didn't understand why. And so when I understood that my core driving motive is peace, and what peace means is an internal harmony when there's a lot going on around. Like some people have described it. Someone described it once as like a train station in Japan with all the busy buzzing everywhere and just being like Zen in that flow. So once I understood that, and then I understood that like one of my limitations was being silently stubborn. Well, I had been so silently stubborn, I didn't realize that other people knew that I was being stubborn. It brought it to like a level of consciousness that I wasn't even really aware of. And avoiding conflict was another one. I thought I was noble when I was avoiding conflict, that it was like very big of me to not, start arguments.
Which is so interesting because I'm a red, and I get so frustrated when people try to avoid conflict.
Oh yeah.
Because to me, it's like it's weak.
Yeah.
Like if there's something going on, let's just talk about it like intelligent adults and figure it out and get some resolution and move on with our lives.
Right.
But people are fearful to enter those conversations. It's one of the most frustrating things in the world to me.
Yeah. And then what happens? And then you get intense. And it's interesting because your personality type was one of the ones that I really struggled with the most. And now, after really embracing this and understanding like why a red does what they do, you just want to get things done. It's not about me.
Right.
Right. And so now I really value that, and I get it, and I'm not intimidated by it. And I also know, how to engage with you in your language. And I also know that if I give you what you need, whatever information that you need to get from A to B, and I understand what your B is, this is what red is, power, getting from A to B, then I give you what you need. You're going to give me what I need, which is peace.
Right.
So it's a process really in understanding like who and what I am, what are my strengths, what are my limitations, and then how is that driving me? How is that behavior affecting all of my relationships? So let's just talk real quickly about the colors. So reds are, as I mentioned, driven by power. Power is getting from A to B. It's not necessarily control. A lot of people think it's control. Right. And reds do control, but this isn't what that's about. It's about affecting things and moving things forward. So reds, there are natural leaders, and each of the personalities has a gift, like a natural talent. Reds is leadership and vision. If there's a gap, a red's just going to naturally step into that gap and fill it. So you'll never, like in business or in any sort of like community or group, if there is a lack of leadership, a red's not going to be asked for, do you want to interview for that position? They're already going to like have their resume in there. They're going to step in without being asked.
So true.
And then our blues are driven by intimacy, and intimacy is this deep, meaningful connection. And it's like being on the same page with somebody and really understanding that person. And so each of these personalities are either logic-based or emotion-based. Reds are logic, reds and whites are logic, and blues and yellows are emotion-based. So blues are really driven by emotion. They're very passionate. And then when it comes to their natural gifts, is quality and service. They're all about service and being of service to others, and they're thinking of other people, and their attention to detail and quality is like off the charts. If you're going on a vacation, bring a blue with you, or have a blue plan the trip, because they're going to research and they're going to know the best places to go on the trip and the hotels to go to and the 5-star restaurants and all of that quality and attention to detail. And then I mentioned the whites. The core driving motive is peace, and the gifts are clarity and tolerance. As a white personality, and this really is one of the things that works for me in business, especially, is I have this gift of clarity. I can see things that other people can't. Like the reds and blues are the big personalities. They're the heavyweights, we call them. They're like the lions and the tigers and the bears. And the whites and the yellows are like the squirrels and the monkeys and the chipmunks. And so the reds and the blues are always in there, like, trying to figure things out. And these people, right? And then as a white, though, I've got this gift of clarity that I can see things that they can't because they're so in the weeds in the forest. So being able to sit back and kind of look at things and evaluate things from a different perspective. And then tolerance. I mean, it's when I say tolerance, for me personally, what that means is I have like the highest pain threshold, way higher than anybody else. And I've just really recently realized this again. I will stay in relationships far too long. I will stay in, or partnerships, anything. I have tolerance, and all of these gifts can be in a positive or a negative,
Right. That's interesting because I've always said too, I have, most of my life, certainly my drunk life and early sobriety, I am a disastrous person with relationships. And I always said, even though I picked really poorly, I always picked really bad partners.
Oh yeah, we have bad pickers.
And we have bad pickers. And I would... And a lot of that is self-esteem stuff, right? Yeah. Which we talk about a lot. Like, of course, I wasn't going to pick a really fantastic quality guy because I didn't feel like I was a really fantastic quality girl, you know? So I picked really poorly. And I always say my saving grace is that I could never stay long. So once it was uncomfortable, once it was clear to me that it wasn't going to work out, like I could deal with a little bit of shit, but I could not stay. Like I had all these friends that would stay in these horrible relationships like forever. And I'm like, I don't know how you do it, dude. Yeah. Like I've got to get out of there.
Right.
I just can't stay. I don't have that tolerance at all.
I'm like the boiling frog, the
You'll stay
frog in the water.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, and that's part of, my growth is really realizing that tolerance is such a gift, especially when it comes to relationships and being tolerant and diversity and including people. However, when it gets to be unhealthy and dysfunctional and toxic, I have to personally work on making sure that my tolerance doesn't get out of skew, that it's balanced and healthy. So that's whites, and then yellows. Yellows are driven by the core motive of fun. Fun is just defined. There's no other way to define it. It's just having fun. They're all about living in the moment. They're here today, gone to Maui. Long-term planning is like, what's for lunch, right?
Right.
Where our reds are visionaries. They're 10 years out.
Yes.
Like you just
for sure.
met my daughter earlier. She's got like medical school planned out and she's going to be a freshman in high school.
Right.
So, it's all that long-term planning.
I'm the same way in my business, my life. Like, yes, this long-term, like I know where I'm going.
Yeah. Yeah. So yellows, not so much. And they don't like to commit. I'm just thinking off the bat, like right now. So that whole long-term planning thing is like, they have that FOMO, that fear of missing out.
Right.
So it's really kind of hard sometimes to, a yellow who hasn't gone through the process of becoming charactered and doesn't understand the effect, any of the personalities. When we don't understand how we affect others, how our character traits, our limitations, or even our strengths can affect other people, then it impacts our relationships. Yeah. So like that fear of missing out that a yellow has, and the motive is it's not bad. It's just it's self-centered, but it's about the better offer. They live by that whole better offer theory.
Yeah.
Like something better might come along. So they're like your George Clooney's and people,
sorry, George.
Yeah, I know. He would just settle down at like age 50, right? Yeah. So they're the ones they're the playboys. And actually Dr. Hartman was engaged. He's yellow. He was engaged like 5 times before he got married. And yellows tend to think that engagement is like when you're deciding, okay, let's just see if maybe we want to get married.
Right.
Not that you make the decision.
Instead of you're actually committed
to
getting married.
They think it's committed to seeing if we want to get married. So
what are the yellow gifts?
The gifts of the yellows, just naturally, they're enthusiastic.
Oh yeah, because they're fun.
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's that energy. You know them when they come in. They're bright, shiny. They're magnetic. The gifts are enthusiasm and optimism. And nobody does optimism like a yellow. I mean, they're the ones that have everything's going to be great, wonderful. So they really, when you have, and we'll talk about blends a little bit in the secondary colors, but when you bring a yellow personality as a secondary into a red or a blue, the big, strong, more serious personalities, and you bring in that optimism piece and that enthusiasm piece, it really knocks off the edges of a red or a blue. It really creates a great dynamic. So
I feel like as a red, I feel like a yellow would be challenging for me.
Okay.
And not that I couldn't respect and really enjoy them, but I think that spontaneity and that sort of lightheartedness would make me crazy, right? Because I'm very serious.
Right.
Like I'm very serious. I'm planning.
Yeah.
I'm intentional in everything I do.
Yep.
So I don't have a lot of those things. And I think that would drive me nuts.
The greatest disservice we could do, Angela, as parents of yellow children, and I have one, is to raise them up in the world and not teach them the gifts of the red.
For sure.
Because it's just, you unleash an 18-year-old yellow boy that I have right now. And I thank goodness I value his red dad so much because he's really instilled. And at times I've thought it's been really harsh. However, he's infused our son with these yellow traits. He's driven. He's responsible. The kid has had a job at Waterway and has gone religiously for 3-4 years in high school. So he's developed those being responsible, those red traits that are so important that a yellow really needs. And one of the things that often happens with kids is that yellow kids can be very gifted when it comes to athletics, but if they don't have that commitment, to working out and practicing. Right. It's wasted.
Follow through. Yep. Right.
Follow through. Yeah. Poor follow through and lack of commitment. Yeah. Yeah. They think they can because the magnetism and the enthusiasm, they're just so bright and shiny and juicy and delicious usually that people love them. Right. Yeah. And they know that, and they know they can get through life, skate by in life on that. But that poor follow through and that lack of the commitment can really, you're not going to make it very far when it comes to emotional intelligence in the workplace and growing up.
Right.
You're not going to make it far, and you're going to really upset some people.
Interesting. One of the things I loved that you said a few minutes ago when we first started talking is kind of recognizing when you said your second husband was saying things to you that your first husband had said, right? And you thought that your first husband had a problem.
Right.
Recognizing, in AA we say, what's the common denominator?
Me.
Right, me.
Yeah.
I'm always the common denominator. And it was the same thing for me in relationships, right? It's when I look at all of my failed relationships, what's the common denominator? It's me.
Right.
So I have to look at myself and stop pointing the finger at other people.
Yeah.
And that's so huge. And that's one of the things I love about this, because again, the more you can recognize who and what you are, the more able you are to better get along with other people.
Right.
And to be accommodating and to continue to be kind, right? That's something that's super important to me. I know I'm red. I know I'm domineering.
Yep.
I know I'm impatient. I know I'm demanding.
Yeah.
I'm all of those things. My standard is so high, it's not natural for other people. And then that's frustrating to me. Right. So, but I have to understand those things about myself so I can temper my behavior and my habits and understand how I impact other people.
Right.
So that I can just be a kind person.
Yes.
Because ultimately I want to be a kind person.
Yeah. And I love that about you, because you've really grasped that. And I think looking back, when I found this, it was so eye-opening to me because I thought that it was everybody else's fault. If he was nicer, then I would engage with him better, and I'd communicate better, and I'd tell him when I had a trip going, for out of town, instead of avoiding it until the last minute and springing it on him that I was traveling for a week, So, and those are definitely some of the things that I did, which created so much anxiety within me. It was all for me. Okay, so my motive is peace. And this is, I was in sales. My whole background's in sales. I'd done so many personality assessments. I know what I did. And that's the difference, is all those personality assessments on the market today are behavior-based. And what's different about color code is it's motive-based. And it goes down to why we do what we do. So I knew what I did. You know your behavior, right? We don't need a test to tell us what we do. But understanding that the reason why, really, and everything boiled down to, the reason why I drank is because I didn't have peace in my relationships. There was conflict. And that's my Achilles heel as a white personality, is avoiding conflict.
Interesting, too, that when you phrase it like that, it kind of allows me to understand a little more why why AA resonated with me so easily, right? Because I'm a red, so my core motive is power.
Yep.
And AA's first step is we were powerless.
Oh, wow.
And that just clicked for me when you were talking, because you said you drank because you didn't have peace.
Right.
And I know my core motive is power. And I was like, yeah, I drank because I didn't have power. And I'm
Right.
like, that's powerless.
Oh, yeah.
No wonder that resonated with me, because that's exactly how I felt. Powerless in my whole freaking life. I didn't have a choice in anything. And that's when we fall into that victimhood and that victim role, right? But yeah, that's so fascinating that would resonate with me.
Okay, so let's unpack that even more. When you talk about that powerlessness and how you connected, and for me, it was peace. That's what AA for me brought me peace. And I'm not sure exactly. Yeah, it was peace because I finally sat and I when somebody had said to me, people that don't have a problem with drinking don't wonder if they have a problem drinking.
Absolutely.
I had this ultimate sense of peace that I was like, oh my gosh, I found my answer, right?
Yes. I felt the same way. Like, I was so relieved.
Yeah.
And I talk about this all the time on the pod, where like I always say, like, being an alcoholic was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
sure. But I was so relieved, because I felt like once I knew what the problem was, then I knew how to fix it.
And that's anything in life. Once you know what the problem is,
So
that's
it didn't
powerful,
bother
right?
me. It
Right.
didn't bother me that I was a drunk.
Yeah.
Like, call me whatever the hell you want to call me.
Right.
I don't care about that. I was just so grateful that then I knew what the solution was.
Exactly. And for me, it's like, I mean, I knew as an alcoholic, I was born alcoholic. I'm like from generations of Irish alcoholics. We just were functioning. My question was more, had I crossed the line? You know, that line that I had been educated on my family about, once you cross that line, you can't go back.
Right.
And that was, is it a problem? That line is like when it becomes a problem. And so when I got that and I got peace, so therefore I kept going back. And then
I can see that too. Peace in the rooms. Like,
oh yeah,
I have such an enormous sense of calm when I walk into AA and sit down. And part of that's because I've gone the same place my whole sobriety, right? So I'm obviously very comfortable there.
Yeah.
But
it's grounding.
It is, but it's so good. Like, you sit in the chair and I just feel like I'm in my place, you know, where I belong.
And the concept of sponsorship too. I mean, I never had anybody. I wasn't friends with a lot of women. I hung out with men because when I hung out with women, my drinking looked out of proportion. So I would, I'd hang out.
Interesting.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Because I'd hang out with guys. I can drink like guys.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
So I was, I
would have never connected that, but yeah.
Never thought that I was a girl's girl or I preferred guys for friends. But the whole relationship thing with sponsorship, I never had a woman in my life like that. Now we have coaches now, but I never.
Well, a sponsor is basically a coach.
Right? Yeah, and even therapists. I mean, I never had anybody in my life that I could go to that did not want something out of it. You know, like you had to pay them for advice, and so much of that's just being raised as an adult child of an alcoholic. You don't take anything from anybody.
Right.
You don't.
Well, you also don't trust.
Right. Don't trust. So there was a sense of peace in that whole sponsorship type of relationship too. It's just knowing that there was somebody else there that had my back. So that's for a white, I guess, really, when I found the answer that I drank because I didn't know how to, number one, communicate, and that caused conflict.
Right.
And so, but then when I've seen, okay, so then we go to the blues, and that's intimacy. Their core motive is intimacy. Connection, right? Blue is the only color, personality, only motive that requires the involvement of another human being to have their motive met. Red you can go do something to fulfill getting powerful, right?
Yeah,
you can go knock some stuff out and feel good.
Right.
As a white, leave me alone, right? It's a lot of peace. I'll go meditate. Yeah, we always say, like, if you are a parent and you have a white child and they've done something, if you send them to their room, that is not punishment.
That's a blessing.
Right, exactly. And then yellows can go have fun, right? I mean, they don't have to have somebody else to have fun. There's yellows,
right.
They have hobbies, they have like high self-esteem, they know what they love to do, and they always find the time to do it.
So are yellows typically extroverts? Because that's what I feel like every time you talk about a yellow, I just picture an extrovert.
Yeah, so those are personality filters, and and no, they can be either one. Mostly, yes, yellows are extroverted. However, you can be introverted too. Yeah. And those are the things that make every yellow personality different. I'm a white. Whites and blues are more introverted typically. And then the yellows and the reds are the most extroverted. However, I'm an extroverted white.
Yeah, which is fascinating
Yeah.
because I'm total introvert red.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're kind of the opposite in that way. Now it's all spectrum, of course. So it's
Yeah.
not like, black and white, extrovert, introvert. I'm just tipped over on that line.
And I think too, like obviously life experience and all of that stuff, like to me, I feel like there are always things that make me not fit. But like I was telling you earlier, I've done a lot of work on myself for a long time, to be a little more balanced and not so extreme in any way, really. So I am a hardcore introvert, but I definitely have some extrovert things too. It's interesting when I think about being a red and being a power motive. Like I always wondered, like, how come I don't like to be in crowds and I'm really uncomfortable in groups, right? But I can stand up and speak in front of 1,000 people and I don't even get nervous. Like it's totally easy for me. But it's because I'm in control of myself and my surroundings. Yeah. And it still is almost introverted because it's one crowd. Like for me, I'm just speaking to almost one person. It just happens to be a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it's still very solo in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So with our blues, that intimacy, they're emotion based and they require the involvement of somebody else. So as far as, you're of course an expert in this, and I'm going to start doing more research into it, is this whole connection theory and addiction, because blues core driving motive is intimacy. Well, when there is not that intimacy, when any of us are not living true to our motives, are not having our motives met, it feels like we're choking, like we can't breathe. And then when you find your motive and you know what color you are, it's like coming home. So for somebody who's kind of going back and forth after they take the assessment, they're not sure which color they are. And with your profile specifically, because you're such a blend of all of them, sometimes you may not know exactly I think you said to me the other day, I'm not a red. Didn't you say something like that?
No, absolutely not. I'm hardcore red.
Oh, that was somebody else.
Yeah, there was no question.
It was somebody, right? There was somebody else that said, "Oh, I'm not a red." And oh, yeah, you are. That's not going to change.
I don't doubt that at all.
But we aren't having our motive met, then it's like choking. It's like but when we find it, or when there's this, we're not sure and you answer the questions, and there's other reasons why you might be challenged with answering the questions or coming up with it in the assessment. It just feels like home. You'll know it. Like fun. If for instance, when a yellow's not having fun, they're miserable. And they go, I know my son goes in this downward spiral. And the antidote to it, the first thing I say to him is, when's the last time you had fun? Are you having fun at work? But no matter what you're doing in life, if in your recovery, you're not having fun, your chances are, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, it's like not as great as they would be as if you brought fun into your recovery.
Right.
Or with the blue, if you're in recovery and you're not connecting with relationships because you don't trust, or you're judgmental, or you're self-righteous, or whatever, your limitations might be that are tripping you up. If you don't form that connection, that I believe that's the base of everything. We talk about fears, fears that drive things and kick off our instincts and our needs and our wants and all that stuff. I believe that at the core, and this has been my experience, Angela, is that at the end of the day, it's when my motive's not being met, when I don't have peace in my relationships, when I think that there's conflict somewhere or potential conflict somewhere, my fears just kicked off. And I know the antidote to it is getting back in my motive, which means for me, moving towards conflict. Having that conversation, not avoiding that red that I know is like after me because they want information.
I don't know if we're actually after you, but
when I avoid you,
but
yes.
We do want the information.
Yeah. And you just want it so you can have your motive met. So here's a beautiful thing that I love about what Dr. Hartman's work and the People Code. And this was a really tough pill to swallow. But there's this system. I mean, this is a lifelong kind of a process, but the first part of it is to get yourself. Step one is get yourself. So once I understand my strengths and my limitations and how I affect other people, and that these are not things that if I just, get a life coach or have a sponsor or pray hard enough are going to go away, not just limitations, but that I've got to I own them. And once I owned them, I integrated them into me. So once I own the fact that I avoid conflict and that I'm silently stubborn and that those things are not going to go away, they go into remission,
Sure.
but they tend to come back at different points in my life, in different situations and different scenarios, and they look differently, but they never go away. They're not removed. And that was like kind of the one myth about, I had to kind of dispel, is that they're never removed. Maybe they're just in remission.
Yeah.
And then once I integrated that into me and my personality, then I really accepted myself. And once I accepted myself for who and what I am, all the good parts and all the bad parts, and I understood that my core driving motive was peace, and that's not good or bad. It just is. It's the application of the motive that makes it good or bad, positive or negative. Peace can be used very positively, and it can also be used in a negative way.
Right.
And so once I understood that, then I could get other people. Then I started to get reds. I started to understand reds, but I couldn't have an effective relationship with you as a red until I really got myself. And I accepted that I avoid conflict. And then I accepted that that's not going away and that I better go to step 2. Well, get yourself step 1, get over yourself is step 2. So until I got over the fact that I avoid conflict, I had to get over it, get over myself. And then I could get a red and I could get the other personalities.
That's so good too, because that's something that I work a lot with people on in my coaching practice for sure, is really understanding who you are and being okay with it, right? Like I always say, like introvert for me was a really hard one because, well, first of all, I was drunk for a long time. So, but it's
so we think we're extroverts.
Yeah, right.
Because we're really extroverted at the bar. Yeah.
So, but I mean, that clouds you, obviously, like it changes your personality. So you don't really have any idea. When I got sober, I didn't really have any idea who I really was.
Right.
Because I looked so different.
Right.
And so what happened in my sobriety is I continued to put myself in these situations that were so familiar to me.
Yep.
As a bartender, being in crowds, right? And being in loud places and all that stuff. When I finally realized in my sobriety, I would sit back and go, why isn't this fun to me? Like I go meet my friends and do all these great things, but it's just lame. Like I'm bored. I'm always, one of my good friends, Joe, said to me one time, he goes, you're like a really pretty wallflower. Because like we were at the bar, like in VIP, and this is in my sobriety, right?
Right.
And of course, all my friends are drinking and doing their thing. Because as you guys know, I was a bartender for many years into my sobriety. So I was still in that life for a long time. And everybody's having a great time and drinking and dancing. And here's me sitting on the couch, just observing quietly by myself, right?
Yeah.
Which is perfect for me.
Right. Now, yeah.
But I would kind of beat myself up. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I not enjoying this? Like, everybody else loves this. Like, what's wrong with me?
So easy to blame like sobriety too, because you weren't that way when you were drinking. Right.
Well,
so you're
I didn't
different.
Have that. I didn't have that experience because I didn't blame sobriety. I just always blame myself.
Okay.
I always think I'm the problem.
Right.
Well, I usually am the problem.
Yeah.
So, but it was just realizing like, oh, nothing's wrong with me. I'm not broken.
Right.
I'm just an introvert.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Like there's nothing wrong with me. But for the longest time, I thought I was broken. I could not figure out what my problem was, why I didn't enjoy these other things. And it's just that I was a round peg and I was trying to cram myself in a square hole. Of course, it just doesn't go.
Right. And that's what I found when I found People Code, is that like, once I understood that it's the peace part of it, and that, it just answered all those questions of why I do what I do, right? Why do I avoid my ex-husband when he just wants to know the schedule for the kids,
Right.
Why do I keep doing these things? It gave me that answer. And then once, like you said, the answer, you can do something about it. So you brought up a point though I wanted to mention, is that when a lot of people, and even when I've like sponsored women, I don't have them take the test in the beginning, because the core basis of the disease of alcoholism is dishonesty, because we're liars. I mean, I was such a liar to myself and other people when I was in my disease that.
Well, and some of that's not intentional either though. Cause like I just said a minute ago, like I really just had no idea who I really was.
Totally. Yeah.
Because I was drunk.
Right.
And
right.
drunk doesn't allow you to know yourself.
Exactly. So when you take the assessment, and that's one of the things about this, it is different than the others. However, it's because you answered the questions from your earliest childhood recollection. So you got to go back and think how you were as a kid before you were drinking, before you were influenced by, outside sources or your parents or anybody else, where we would have tried to fit in or change ourselves to fit in, who I was as a kid originally. And so oftentimes when we're in that spot, it takes us a while to really get honest with ourselves about that. And that's kind of the only thing that could really skew results when they come back, is that like, you got to have the ability to answer the questions honestly, because like you mentioned earlier, it's not super easy answering the question. Sometimes it's a little challenging, right?
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Well, like the assessment is very simple. There's no question.
Yeah.
It's very simple. I felt like there were words that just didn't fit me. So it says, read these words and pick the one that best describes you as a child. And it gives you 4 words.
Right.
And I would stare at them going, well, none of those are really appropriate to me. Like none of those fit me. And then of course I start overthinking it. And I'm like, well, when they say child, do they mean child like in single digits, like when I was 8 or 9? Or do they mean child when I was 15 because you're still a child?
Right.
Or do they mean child when I was 21? Like those are just different phases and very different experiences and belief systems and different understandings of the world, right? Those are different perspectives.
Right.
So, but it was hard because, and then there are some that will be like 3 words and 2 would be spot on. And the third word, I'd be like, that's not me at all. Right. But I guess I have to choose the best one. Yep. But there were, just being honest, there were several that I would have skipped if I had the ability, because the word, there just was not a single word in the bunch that fit me at all.
Yeah. And it's intentionally authored that way. And the questions actually ask what you are like most of the time. So if you take those 4 words, you think, I'm not any of those. Well, there would be one of those words that, if you could think, well, most of the time or more than others, more than the other, if that behavior ever showed up. So it doesn't, you're not going to get like a diagnosis of something that it's not inaccurate. It's intentionally the way that it's worded is to, it's tough. Sometimes we don't want to look at things like we talked about. There was one thing that you had mentioned earlier, or I had a friend who's a white personality and lazy was on his profile. And he was dating this wonderful woman at the time. Matter of fact, I saw them the other day. They're married now. And he had a couple, a white personality. He had married a couple yellows. It didn't really work out. So he didn't want to get married again, but he had really found the one. And I was talking to him about business and he was saying, he's a national sales manager. He's got a really, high level job. He's a very highly functioning person in the business world. And that's not really typical to be in a sales leadership type of a role for a white personality. So he's very charactered and developed. And he goes, this thing with whites being lazy, he goes, I just don't get that. That really bothers me. And I looked at him, I go, okay, so what areas of your life do you see that showing? He goes, I'm not lazy. I said, okay, well, what about your relationship? What about that area? And he looked at me, he's like, okay, you got me. And they got engaged like a week later. But it's like she was a 1 and he was, he just was being lazy about it. So that's where we look at those things. It's like, yeah, it may not be in the main thing at work or like in your main, family relationship. Somewhere it is somewhere it shows up in different areas of that behavior. So
I know for me, the word that I didn't like that is in red once is approval.
Yeah.
Like that really makes me uncomfortable. And there were a couple, like when I was answering them, I almost felt like I was lying, like I felt like I wasn't being honest because I was like, well, none of them fit me. So I'll go with this one,
Yeah. That's a perfect example of it. And each of the colors have their own sets of needs and wants.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to, in the show notes, provide a link where you guys can see all the information that we're talking about and you can get a little more info and start figuring out what color you are or what color your spouse is or your kids or whatever. It's really fun to get into this stuff and really enlightening and just another tool that we can utilize to get farther in our recovery and in life, right?
Right. Because we all do have needs and wants. And I think they're so important to understand these and know these, and also to understand what someone else's needs and wants are too, because that's how we can really be effective with other people. Because I believe that in life's all about relationships. It is. I mean, like, I don't think I would have had a drinking problem if it wasn't for having relationships in my life, right? It was those relationships, whether it was at business or at home with my kids as a mother, or with my sister or my parents, or my partner, my spouse. It were other people were the ones that I always thought drove me to drink, right? If they would just behave better.
If everybody would do what I wanted them to do, my life would be so much easier.
Yeah. So as a white personality, I want to feel good inside. It's all about, I choose comfort over character. It is my default every day of the week. Every day of the week. Today, push comes to shove, I will choose comfort over character. And because in one of my needs as a white personality is to feel good inside. So I that happens to me maybe more so than other people. As a yellow, yellows need to connect. And they need to be liked. Yellows love to be adored. And freedom, that's the other thing. Freedom and fun for a yellow. So if you got a yellow, if you're an employer or you're a spouse or a partner or your best friend, like, don't lock them down to commitment. You know, don't lock them down for dates and commitments and things like that. They have to like have a way out. Dr. Hartman talks about, like, he went to his dad, he'd been engaged 5 times, but he was really in love with his wife, Jean. They've been married for like 30, long time. She's amazing. And she's blue, like 90% blue. And his dad said to him, well, you can always get divorced.
Right.
And that's when he made the decision and they got married. And I know a lot of listeners, especially like blue personalities, be like, oh my God, it's like the most horrible thing to say or to think about. That's not, why that you shouldn't even think that, right? Well, no, it's like, that's what a yellow needs. They need to have an out and then they can commit.
Yeah.
Right. But if you don't know that about yellows, then there are so many missed opportunities for relationships to connect and to go deeper. I think at every level where they just go sideways.
Yeah.
So the needs and the wants and the blues, like the number one thing is this emotional connection, They need to be good morally also. There are Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and to be understood and appreciated. That's the thing. If you want a good relationship with a blue, appreciate them. And I don't mean just like thanks, because they get, it has to be sincere. They want a sincere appreciation and they want to be understood. And so this tool, this people code, and knowing a blue's motive is really such a way to connect with a blue, because when a blue's understood and you're on the same page, you connect and blues have friends. They have deep, meaningful connections, where like yellows have lots of friends, more surface level relationships. The blues have a smaller amount of friends, but just much deeper relationships. And then on your reds with the needs, which one did you relate with the most?
On needs?
Needs and wants.
So the needs for a red is to look good intellectually, to be respected, to be productive, to be liked. For me, hands down, is to look good intellectually. Like, my intelligence is the number one thing in my life.
Yeah.
And I think part of that too is because, when I was younger, again, bartending and the life that I lived in Los Angeles, I bartended all over Hollywood and Beverly Hills. And I was very much that, I had that, I always say, like, my 20s could have been an MTV show, like that was my life.
Yeah.
And everything in my life revolved around what I looked like.
Right.
And like getting jobs. Like, I remember going for bartending jobs in Los Angeles, and like they take a Polaroid of you and staple it to your application, because it's so much about what you look like.
Right.
And I'm sure they would tell you it's to remember who people are, but
right.
It's so much about what you look like. Everything is about what you look like. So as I got older, as I got sober, as I started reconnecting with being smart, because I was super smart when I was a kid.
Right.
And I knew that, like my mom had us, me and my older brother both, like we read before we started school. We were little spelling bee champs. Like I was an avid reader my entire life. So I knew when I was younger that I had that, that I was a smart person, but then everything just shifted to my appearance. And that's how I lived for many years. So as I got healthier and I got more centered and got to know myself better as a human being, I really started to move a lot away from what I looked like, and it all became internal for me. And that's when I reconnected with my intelligence. So it's so important to me to be smart, and
Yeah.
people make a lot of assumptions when they see you in your appearance. And I always say, like, my insides don't match my outsides.
Right.
People make a lot of assumptions. They assume I'm going to be a certain way. And then they speak to me. And I think it's even more intimidating. Like, people say that to me all the time. Like, oh, wow, I didn't know you were that smart.
Right.
And I'm like,
Love it.
I love it.
Shocker.
But that is for sure, hands down, the most important thing to me, because it's so much more validating than how I lived before, just based on my appearance.
Right. So what you may not resonate with this because you have a lot of blue in you. A blue, as far as like, they need to know the information. They do the research. They need to know. They need to have a solid foundation before that they would present something, or they have to have that. Whereas a red needs to look good technically, meaning or intellectually. Like, so reds in leadership almost always have a good blue, supporting them to do the detail work. They just need to know that blue did the detailed work and that information is accurate. So then you give it to a red and then they go present it or something, right? They don't need to actually do the homework and get the info. They just need to know that the information is right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's not me at all.
Right.
Like, I have to do the research myself. Right. That's the only way I will believe it.
And I believe that's that blue. You have so much blue in you there, where that may slow you down. This is an example of what might trip you up
for sure
from the red, and really getting in the zone of your core driving motive is I don't know if you have the perfectionism, I don't remember, but the blue attention to detail, the perfectionism. So you have a red core personality, and then your secondary color is blue, which we'll get into the secondary here in a second. But the secondary is a big influence. And this is how, like, every red's not the same. You have personality filters, like your birth order, or whether you're extroverted or introverted. But then also there's a secondary color. So as a red with a blue secondary, that's a lot of personality. And like I mentioned, it could really trip you up from really getting things done.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because that's something that we talk about a lot in entrepreneurship, right? Is analysis paralysis. And there's one of my favorite sayings is there's a difference between being busy and being productive.
Right.
And that's where that analysis paralysis can trip you up. Like, I can get so consumed in building a website or deciding I want to change all the copy on all my websites, right? Or making graphics. Like, I can get so caught up in this little busy work and it's not productive.
Right.
But like, I have to do it because I have to know it's done properly.
Yeah.
And I have that control, right? I need all of that stuff. But yeah, it's just fascinating, because in entrepreneurship, that is something that is such a limitation, because really what I'll catch myself doing is hiding in that busy work, and I'm not doing anything that's actually increasing my bottom line so that I can grow and continue to serve people the way I want to, right? If I just stay the same and I don't make any money, then I can't continue to produce a podcast and graphics and websites. Like, I can't do any of that stuff, but I will. Like, sometimes some little piece of fear will get a hold of me, and I'll find myself just burying myself in that busy work, and I'm not being productive at all.
Right. And and you're choking yourself also, because you're not getting things done and making forward progress with things, right? A to B.
So then I don't feel good.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I get frustrated, and it's a downward spiral.
Cycle. Exactly. So you mentioned control, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about real briefly here, is that each of these personality types, reds and blues, are controlling. They're the controlling. They have control. They seek to control others. Whites and yellows run from control. We do not like to be controlled. So, but control is different for a red and a blue. A red controls in a way where they want to make sure things are getting done and things are moving forward. So it doesn't really matter how it's getting done, the attention to it. It's just that it's getting done. So like, if you have a red manager, they're going to check on you, and it's going to be things more like, how's it coming? Are you going to meet your deadlines? That type of stuff. Whereas a blue is going to be more controlling how it's done. It's the how. The reds are the when, and the blues are the how. Want to make sure that we've got the right tools.
That's so funny, because I say that all the time, especially like with my sober living houses. I'm like, you don't have to do it the way I do it. I just want the end result to be the same.
Right.
This is what I expect the end result to look like. How you get there is on you.
Total. Red. That's absolute red. Yeah. Total. Now blue would be like, this is exactly like how I want you to do it. This is the manual, the standard operating procedure manual. And if you break it, then they're all about rules. We don't break rules. Blues don't break rules. There's consequences in our lectures with them. So, but then with the whites and the yellows, we do not like to be controlled. And if we sense control, we run. I just want to let you know that. And the antidote to it is always to give what the other person needs in their motive. So if you're a white or a yellow and you feel a red breathing down your neck, or a yellow or a blue breathing down your neck, sense of control, you just get over yourself. You identify as control, and you just give them what they need. And then once I give,
and then we'll go away.
And then they go away, and then I get peace, and you can go have fun, yellow.
I so love this stuff. I think this is such good information. And again, you guys, I put a link in the show notes where you can go take the assessment yourself. Okay, so that link will be in the show notes. And let me know too if you guys enjoy this information as much as I do, because I would love to do some more stuff with Carrie and get deeper into all the different colors and figuring out who you are and what you are and how to live better in the world, and also to strengthen your recovery, which is really why I like to know this stuff, so that I can make sure I'm feeding my sobriety appropriately and keeping it strong. So that is it for us today. Thank you again, Carrie, for being here and sharing all of this. I'm sure we'll hear more from you in the future on Addiction Unlimited. For you guys, I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you next week.
You've reached the end of another great episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Candid and honest conversation about addiction and recovery. Be sure to visit us at addictionunlimited.com to join the conversation and access show notes and links to everything we talked about. Love this episode? Please take 30 seconds to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes to help us improve and give you the information you want. Thanks for listening. See you next week.